Entrepreneur, author, and financial consultant Mark Bernstein helps high-performing entrepreneurial business owners create a vision for the future and follow through on their goals and intentions. Ange Honorato is a business growth strategist who blends psychology and business together to create conscious leaders and business owners who impact the world. Founders Forum is a radio show podcast sharing the real stories behind entrepreneurship as founders discover more about themselves while providing valuable lessons and some fun and entertainment for you. Now, here's Mark and Ange.
Good morning, America. Good morning, Arizona. I'll tell you why in a minute. And good morning, everybody who's listening to the podcast, or good evening, or whenever it is you happen to be listening. And it's morning if you're listening on the radio. Today, we have a special guest that I actually met on the golf course in Aruba a couple of weeks ago. And Mike, I don't think I told you that on the way home, I got COVID somewhere on the plane. My wife and I, in the airport, and the plane was very crowded. Fortunately, it was a very mild case, but it makes you think twice about that thing's not over yet. And you sort of have to be aware. And honestly, we weren't even thinking it was a thing anymore, but it is. Anyway, Ange, we talked about a little bit of a thought for the day earlier, and I'll let you introduce that topic, and then we'll bring Mike on, and he may want to participate as well.
Absolutely. So we were chatting prior to the morning show getting on about how Mark and I didn't realize, but we both have a morning practice of doing I am statements, affirmational type of statements, setting daily intentions, and really both of us kind of realized that we've been doing that in earnest the last year, and sort of how impactful and almost measurable the impact has been on that. So, we were chatting about it, and, we're going to get into a formal introduction here of our guest, Mike, today. But Mike, we're just kind of curious, would love to know, are there any sort of daily practices, morning practices like that you have found to be, impactful in your life and business?
Or evening.
Yep. Well, and coincidentally, Mark, both morning and evening, because it's part of the 10th and 11th step of the 12-step program. So every morning, and I don't want to lie and say I do it every morning, but most mornings I spend about 15 minutes by myself. I read my daily meditation, and I just ask my higher power, where do you need me today? And I just let that guide me. And things don't always go perfect, but I try to start my day with that. And I try to start my day with, making it about something other than myself, because I think about me the second I wake up, and I need to think about others, it's just how we are, and I try to center myself to be as unselfish as possible, because I instinctively want to be selfish. Because I wake up, I don't think about, my wife and my kids or anything. I think about, what do I have to do today? What do I have got to pack in? And I don't think about anybody else. So I take that 15 minutes to try to center myself on that concept.
Yeah, it's so important, and we'll get into this in a little bit further. But I think it's amazing that those tenets were built into the 12-step program many, many, many decades ago. So it's really wonderful to hear.
Yeah, and at night I review the day and where did I wrong somebody, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of I like that, because I do wake up. I think everybody's human nature, wake up, think about yourself, of course. Yes. But a lot of my I am statements are about how I relate with others and how I, want to interact with others and things like that. We were just talking about the difference between affirmations and I am statements, and I've done affirmations for many, many years. But for me, saying out loud the I am statements is a whole different thing than just an affirmation, because it always starts out with I am. So it has to do with your being, not just things that you aspire to or that you want in your life or whatever it is. So just a little thought, and that's something that Ange and I were discussing. But anyway, I think all of this plays into what we're going to talk about with Mike today. So as I mentioned, we met on the golf course. Mike told me his story. I thought it was fascinating, and I said, we got to get you on the show, because Mike is founder, CEO, and clinical director of Family First Intervention. And Family First Intervention specializes in helping families and their loved ones with substance abuse and mental disorders. Before we talk about your story, which we will, Mike, you explain to me what's different about what you do versus other intervention centers. Would you mind expanding on that a little bit?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. When we first started doing this, a long time ago, back in 05. Interventions were basically glorified paid 12-step calls. You got called in to talk somebody's loved one into treatment. And over time, through experience and of course education, you realize that the family is significantly more unwell than the substance user. And to think that we're just going to go and take somebody to treatment and that family's going to get better because they're there is just not true. All of our work, well, I shouldn't say all of it, the majority of it anyway, occurs afterwards. And most people don't believe this until it happens. The better the person does in treatment, the worse the family gets. They lose that sense of purpose. They lose that role of being needed. Their unhealthy family roles try to find its way home to balance, and they go berserk. I mean, I've had people doing well, like, wanting to extend in treatment, and the family wants to sue us. And it's just
by the way, that doesn't do well for the long term of the original patient either. I would.
Well, that's a great question, because we've actually done reverse interventions to where when the substance user gets better and the family refuses to get better, we actually bring them in to tell the family it goes from family setting boundaries on them to get them in. Now the substance user setting boundaries to back off.
Right. But you're dealing with that issue. Without dealing with it, I think that would
100%. And most interventionists, I will always concede to the fact that they do as well of a job as we do of talking people in. Some may even be better at it. But where they can't and where they lack is they don't have, a 30-person team of interventionists and clinicians to handle all of the necessary involvement with what occurs afterwards. Because you got 10 family members. And even though you're running your weekly groups, they're all popping off in different times of days with different issues. How is one or two people with an intervention firm going to handle that? They're not. They tell you they will on the front end, and then you read the reviews on the back end, and they couldn't.
So what you do is more complex, obviously, because you've got a lot of moving parts, a lot of moving people, but much more effective, I've got to imagine.
Well, 100%. I mean, interventionists come in and tell mom, don't give them money. Our question is, Mom, what do you get out of giving them money? We get behind the scenes of what hit are you getting? Because an enabler is a drug addict. Their drug of choice is the IP, the person. Every single family system has a role. You got the perfectionist hero, you got the primary enabler, and the list goes on, the martyr, et cetera. All those people are just as sick. So it's one thing to say, don't do that. The other part is to help them understand why they do it. And that's what makes us completely different.
Mike, you also mentioned to me, I believe, that what you did was, you wouldn't call it this because you wouldn't take this kind of credit, but innovative, maybe the first firm that's really handling it that way. And I believe you've kind of started a movement that there's, sort of national movement in that area. Is that a fair assumption?
Yeah, and you're right. I do not want to sound like my ego is too big for the screen because I'm humbled by this. But when we first started doing this, as I said, not one interventionist in the nation even had the word family on their website. And as we evolve and have become the leader and the largest in the nation, you go online now and there isn't an interventionist in the country that doesn't have the exact verbiage and or structure of their organization as we do. And I'm humbled by that. At first I was angered, like, you're stealing my stuff. Now it's like, good.
Yeah.
Now just make sure you got the manpower to do it. Don't put it on your website and not follow through. But there is a movement, and I even had a professor, who told me, I wrote a paper. It was called Forgotten Families. I don't think he knew what I did. And I remember sitting in his room, in his office, he's like, thank you for writing about this. This is because even in graduate school, it's like the family's such a tiny piece. Mm-hmm. It's all about the addict and the alcoholic. And it's like we're ripping through this family system like a tornado and nobody talks about it. It's like, oh, they'll be fine. No. Yeah. So we have created a movement and I'm grateful for it and I'm humbled by it. And I just, like I said, I don't mind people piggybacking. Just do it if you say you're going to do it. Just don't put it on the website so families buy your product and then drop them like a hot potato after they hire you.
So we're going. I just want to ask you one question about when you started that, which will lead into your story, and then we'll get more into the details. So, how long ago was that you started with the Family First type of intervention?
Well, I started doing interventions in 2005 for another intervention firm, and I could notice, we all could notice within very short period of time that part. And they just weren't on board with that. I'm grateful for them. There's nothing bad to say. They've helped me with my career, but I started Family First because of that. that's where the name came from. I always say I didn't pick that name because GoDaddy had it on sale.
Right.
There was some thought went into that.
Sure.
And then I started Family First, and we were just, just myself in a spare bedroom of my home. And then I brought one other person in to help me with interventions, but I was doing everything. And then it just slowly over time, one more person at a time, and where the growth really occurred wasn't just the phone calls because of the website presence. It was the aftercare part, because I was on the phone all day, every day, like whack-a-mole with all these families. And we were only doing like 5 interventions, 10 interventions at the time a month. Now we do 30 to 40. You know what I mean? So there was a lot that had to be done. So that's where it came from. It's just how much energy and how much time was necessary afterwards. Like the call, the setup, the scheduling, that's the easy part. But man, when that intervention was over, when it was successful, when it's not successful, it's almost like, okay, well, we know how to do this. But when the substance user goes, I mean, I got a 7,800 square foot office behind the scenes of one person going into the home to intervene. Think about that.
Right.
Yeah.
How many employees do you have? I know you mentioned 30 interventionists, but
yeah, we have 11 office employees, and then we have 18 interventionists, and then we have actually 12 because we have an office manager. And then of course we've got a full web team that doesn't even include in the count. There's a 6-person web team.
Got it.
That I collaborate with. So yeah, it's a big operation for intervention.
So tell us a little bit about your background and how, what brought you to where you are today.
My background, well, I grew up in a pretty normal household. I shared with you guys before this. There was a couple of things that obviously happened in my life that I think I was always lost. But I started using painkillers at an early age. And I had went to a junior college called Harper in Palatine, Illinois. And I remember when I was there, and I was getting my associate degree, and I remember I was taking massive amounts of hydrocodone. I had a friend who had Hodgkin's lymphoma cancer, and he was giving me meds, and I was just getting from everywhere. But I remember I said, if I get accepted to Northern Illinois University's business school, I'll quit. And I did. And I just cold turkey stopped. And I went away to school, and I got my degree in finance. And I drank, but I wasn't like alcoholic level. And then the day I got home for my graduation, one of my friends I used to get high with gave me hydrocodones, and I took them, and I was off to the races. But I managed to get a job. I was working for Ameritech, and then went downtown to Arthur Anderson, the Big 5 accounting firm. And then I went to rehab, and I had met a girl, and she introduced me to heroin. And that was in 2000. I graduated college in 97, and then that was in 2000. And by 2002, I was an inmate in the Illinois Department of Corrections. Wow. Because it was for a nonviolent crime. Even I remember the judge even saying, I've never seen somebody try so hard to go to prison. Because I was just like this easy probation, and I just kept violating. Like I did everything they told. I just couldn't pass a drug test. And I got out, and then I hit the heroin hard to the point of, if it wasn't for my parents' basement, I mean, I was nothing. And then in 2005, they staged an intervention, and I went to treatment. And I also remember I left treatment, and I remember the interventionist telling my mom and dad not to answer the phone. And they helped them hold boundaries. And I ended up staying, and I ended up staying out in Valparaiso, Indiana for 6 months.
Listen,
and then
go ahead. Let's finish in a minute. We have to take a break.
And there was that intervention company that hired me after that.
Excellent. I know Ange has some great, more detailed questions to ask you, but right before that, we're going to take a quick commercial break.
Are you feeling helpless watching a loved one struggle with addiction? You don't have to face it alone, and you don't have to wait for rock bottom. Family First Intervention is the industry leader in intervention services and family counseling, support, and recovery. They understand the impact of addiction on families. It's not just about the substance user, it's about the family too. Their team is there to help you navigate through the challenges and find resolution solution. At Family First Intervention, they focus on empowering the entire family system. Their expert team will guide you through the process, offering support and understanding every step of the way. No more fear or uncertainty. Take control and create positive change. Don't wait for permission to ask for help. Your family's well-being is the priority. Call 1-888-316-5950 or visit family-intervention.com and take the first step towards healing today. Change is possible. They can help.
Take it away, Ange.
Well, Mike, as you're speaking both offline and sharing your story here today, the first thing I'm thinking is I wish we had a podcast format like Lex Friedman or Lewis Howes where we could talk about 3 hours about this topic, because it's just so big and there's so many different pieces to it. But a couple of things that popped into my mind quickly as you were speaking. Number one, the fact that you're very humbled by and now want to share the innovative approach that you've developed into the world. And it reminds me very much when we were talking offline about Gabor Mate and Dick Schwartz, the creator of internal family systems. And I'm sure you're aware of this, where I think Dick often talks about the same thing, where he was a trained family systems, therapist, and then very quickly realized that, well, that was a key part of this, that there's also internal family. There's different parts and different family, members, if you will, in each one of us. And I think the combination of the understanding of both of that, right? That usually the addict or the person that's getting the spotlight is really just sometimes the unconscious cycle breaker in that family. And the real work does have to focus on the family, the generational inherited piece, the dynamics of that, the systems piece of that. And I've grown up in the same way. I went to rehab. A sister of mine went to rehab. It's taken 30 years to realize that we've got to fix the family. But I also experienced what you did, which is the intervention. And then everybody thinks, oh, the problem is solved when you address the quote unquote, the addict. And so what I'm curious about is, how did this actually come about for you? I mean, you experienced it, but what helped you kind of see in the marketplace that this was not the approach that was working? And what are some of the ways in which you were able to kind of get that momentum behind? Because, you're going in and changing mindsets of trained therapists that don't necessarily like to change new technologies and modalities. So I'm curious about how that worked for you.
Well, the family showed me the way. They're the ones that picked up the phone and called me with the crises after the intervention. It didn't take but a week to see the common denominators and patterns. Everybody thinks they're terminally unique, but you could set a watch to 99% of the behaviors we experience at these interventions. That's why families think, we have this addiction manual, and families think that I personally wrote it for their situation. It's like, no, we've had the same one for 20 years. You're no different than the next family. You think you are, but you're not. And it was, families led the way. They showed me what they needed. And then, of course, when I went back to, school and got my degree in addiction studies and counseling, I learned a lot more about it. But again, they didn't even touch on it. So it was experiencing it in the real world. It was watching what happened after the intervention. And then it was about, when I first started taking phone calls, I thought I was going to be like a receptionist at a doctor's office. They're just going to call and schedule these things. I didn't realize how involved it was to try to get people to do this. 9 out of 10 people accept help when we get there. 1 out of 10 families let us come. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? It's like we talked before. Most of my calls come from moms. 90% of my calls are shot down by dad. Yeah. Or the oldest, hero's son or daughter, which is mostly the son. But it was trial and error. It was just the experience. Truth be told, prior to, I had a degree in finance at the time. I knew nothing about this. But I may not be the smartest guy, but I wasn't an idiot. I picked up on patterns, and it was the same thing every single intervention. Family went berserk when they got better. Family wasn't upset when they said no. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you know what I mean? And there were the same calls afterwards, and then it just expanded.
Yeah. Well, I have to, say, when we've talked about this, before, Mark and I, in one of our other shows, I went to graduate school, and actually undergrad and graduate school, and graduated grad in 2005. And I said, none of the family systems or IFS, which was developed at the time, didn't even make it in my textbooks. No. Right. So it's to me, it's It's so important, the work that you're doing. I think there's an educational piece to this, in the world, in the market. And so I'm just really excited that you've been able to, I mean, unfortunately, you had to go through what you had to go through, but being in the seat that you have, it's going to continue to hopefully build momentum and really heal lives, change the world. Really, not to be over gratuitous about it, but I really believe that.
Thank you.
Mike,
and everything happens for a reason.
Absolutely. Mike, I wanted to ask you, because you are a business owner and you are a founder, and given that, one of the questions we like to ask here is about future vision. And I know you've wanted to discuss your 10-year vision, and when you do that, be as colorful as you can about yourself, your business. Obviously you're a servant to people in terms of what you do, but you're also a business owner. So what is your vision for the future? Might include your family, whatever else you'd like to include. But I'd like to hear if today is July. Today we're July of 2033. 10 years from now, and we're looking back on the last 10 years. What would need to happen for you to feel like, boy, that was really a successful 10-year period in my life?
When you just asked that question, I hadn't thought about. I thought about it, but something just popped into my head, and I got a little emotional. My dad taught me a long time ago, and I'll never forget. I was a young kid, and he said, "Do you know why we won World War II?" And I said, "No." He said, "Because the Germans spread themselves too thin." Don't ever spread yourself too thin. Do one thing and do it right. So when you ask me about my 10-year vision, when I look at our industry, there's so many people jumping into this space that shouldn't be. We've got people now charging crazy amounts of money for intervention trainings, for coached interventions over the phone. That's like calling your lawyer and saying, "Here's a $5,000 retainer. I'm going to go to court. Tell me what to do." So why am I telling you this? Because my 10-year vision is to keep doing what I'm doing and do more of it, and to continue to work on how we can better, increase our outcomes for families who are in our family recovery coaching program. I want to follow my dad's advice. I don't want to spread myself into all these other things for money grabs. I want to do more of this. I want to build our website. I want to become a bigger presence, bigger than we already are, and just continue to help the people that call, help their loved ones find sobriety, and help those families, regardless of whether or not their loved ones find sobriety, and just continuously chip away at the engagement rate and the outcome for the family's success, so that one day they don't need us or a therapist. They will intuitively, instinctively know, kind of the 9-step promises. They intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle them. So my 10-year vision is to be much bigger and just doing more of what we're doing.
So,
on a grander scale.
So I'll put another set of words to that, is to focus on your unique ability and only do that, which I think is wonderful.
I don't want to spread myself too thin and just start going out there like these other interventionists. Like I said, it rubs me the wrong way. It's like when families are like, "Well, we got a guy that's going to talk us into how to do an intervention over the phone for $3,000. That's not my 10-year vision. Because you could get that service for free at your 12-step fellowship, all from the members of AA.
Absolutely. Believe it or not, we only have a few minutes left, and I know, Angie, you had a couple quick questions for Mike.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think as a natural extension to that, vision, Mike, is as you're now looking the other direction, right? So looking backwards, what would be the most important, kind of a two-part question. If you were to be able to look at and talk to your younger self, what would you say? And then also, what would be, the perfect legacy for you to be able to leave behind based on the work that you've been doing?
What I would tell my younger self is the same thing I try to teach my twin daughters, where you always got to remember you don't know what another person's going through, so don't take how they treat you personally. Because when somebody doesn't like you, it's usually because they see something in you they don't like about themselves, or they remind you remind them of somebody they don't like. And I would, because I used to take things personally, and I always try to be unselfish, because again, instinctively, I would want my younger self to know that it's one thing to do something for somebody, but what are the motives behind it? Because it's like, I always make the joke, if I ever get arrested again, it'll be from stealing my dollar back out of the basket at Starbucks. Because if I give the barista the dollar and he or she doesn't see me, whoa.
Right.
But so what's the motive? Am I tipping for them or am I tipping for me? So now if I tip at Starbucks or wherever I'm at, I make sure I do it when they're not watching. I don't like it, but I do it. So that's what I would tell my younger self, is that make sure that when you're doing something for somebody else, you're doing it for them and not you. And you trust me, you'll know the feeling when it is for them versus it being for you. And as far as a legacy, I would like to be known as a good dad and a good husband. And I would like to be known for putting people first. It goes back to what I said, my 10-year vision. I don't ever want to make this about money. And yes, everybody, this is a business. We make money. People all the time say, it's about the money. It's like, tell me one place that isn't. You know what I mean? Right. Even nonprofits are about the money. They just have different accounting structures. We all know that. Right. But at the end of the day, I just want to be, I've always said that the second that I count the money before the vision of the company, I have to get out. And I haven't got there yet. So it's like putting the family first. I want to be the legacy. And I guess I always wonder what's going to be on my headstone. I just hope people think I was genuine. I just want my daughters to, know that they had a good dad, because I had a good dad, so I just, I don't know. I want to be unselfish, and I want to stay humble, because sometimes there's not a hand big enough to pat me on the back. And it's like, sometimes when things go the right way, I want to take credit for that. And I got to remember that, somebody told me a long time ago, nobody's had an original thought since Adam and Eve, right? So we're all regurgitating other people's information. So who am I to think that I'm the end all be all of information? I may have found a way to package it differently, but we're all just using each other's stuff. It's all about the presentation, but it's about where you're delivering it from. And that's what I think the biggest difference is. And if I could leave you with that, that's what I always wanted our website to be. If you look at our website, it's not about us, it's about families. And when you look at other people's websites, it's about them, not the people. And I don't ever want to be that guy.
Mike, I would tell you this, you definitely occur to both of us as a very authentic soul who is in service of others. And as a result, I hope you make all the money in the world as long as you keep that purpose, in front of you, which I know you will. And your appearance on the show has only reinforced that today. So it's really been a pleasure. Maybe we'll have time to continue again in the future and get into some deeper issues. I know Ange wants to do that.
Yeah, we've got, this could be a 5-part show in my mind.
Mike, I hate to tell you this, but she says this to every guest. So it's like, maybe.
I know.
Well, we're just getting such amazing game changers. We need to change the name of the show to Game Changer Forum, because it's
all
really
right. We're not
Mark,
changing
I know this. She says it to everybody. This is where I'm going to let my ego overtake my humility.
But the reality is, it is because we have very interesting people on the show, and we'll have a lot of part 2. So we'll see you on down the road. And listen, for everybody, thanks for joining us today on Founders Forum, and we're looking forward to seeing you again next week and hearing you again.